Great. So here we are. Today is Thanksgiving in the United States. And is it this week?
Oh, it's next week.
Next week.
One more week.
One
Yeah.
more week. This is why I sometimes have to yell at my sister because she sends me these Facebook messages saying, "Oh, well, it's Thanksgiving." And I'm going, did I'm really bad with numbers to begin with, and then with calendars, it's even worse. And since my calendar is Canadian, I don't know. And I went, so I wished her a happy Thanksgiving. Now she just got back to me saying,
Yeah.
no.
Blew that one. 1 week. One more week.
So I blew it. Thank you very much, sister. Love you dearly. Now get lost for a while.
Yeah.
So this morning your podcast, your message was on, well, it reads as, this is the post-apocalyptic US situation, which one can interpret that any way they want. But really, it follows through on the theme that you and I have been talking about, and that is, what's the starting point of persuading people? One of the challenges that we all face is trying to get people to understand what's good for them. It's like our children, don't do that. It's not good for you. And of course, they go ahead and do it anyway because, they know better or don't know better or whatever term you want to use. So, persuading people, and if I understand the session, your message this morning, it's about looking at the world in a way that's almost impossible through other people's eyes.
Yeah.
What do they see? So, how does one do that?
Well, it for me it was for me it was a bit of a difficult art to learn, and it took a while. And I had a couple of great thinkers in my army career that kind of walked me through it. And we often believe simply because we believe something to be correct that it is indeed correct.
Mhm.
We can't fathom the idea that I believe something is correct, but in fact, I might actually be wrong.
Mhm.
And when you start talking about perspectives,
Mhm.
then you're into the subjective world. And if you believe morally and ethically something is correct, that does not make it correct. That just
Mhm.
means you believe that it's
Mhm.
morally and ethically correct.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so what we do is we have a tendency, especially in the age of social media, is to paint and immediately judge people who don't follow the same pattern of behavior or don't
Mhm.
look at things through the same
Mhm.
lens, for lack of a better
Mhm.
term.
Well,
And the art is learning how to understand a perspective that another individual, a country, nation, government, party, whatever it may be,
yeah.
has through their eyes,
Mhm. Mhm.
not in the effort that you want to agree with it. Nothing. It's never about agreeing with with whether somebody does something or not. It's about understanding their why. It's about understanding from their perspective the why. And what I used in the example in the podcast and the Substack article was Putin's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. From a moral and ethical standard, everybody in the global north, save a handful of allies, have said you can't do that. That's against the global norm. We don't do that. But nobody, very few, have stopped to look to see, well, why? Other than just calling an individual a madman, crazy, lunatic, whatever you want to do, wants to recreate the Soviet Union, and all these other labels that are nonsense. Why would an individual do that? Why would a country do that? And when you learn to look through the lens and accept things the way they see it, not just Putin, but whomever it is you have a disagreement with, it's a lot easier to understand the reason why. Linking to what we were talking about before about persuasion,
Mhm.
it's very difficult to persuade somebody to do something if you don't understand why they're doing what they're currently doing.
Mhm.
Obviously, if you want to persuade somebody, you want them to change their behavior.
Mhm. Mhm.
But if you don't understand why they're doing A, you can't just try to persuade them to get over here to B.
Mhm.
Or I would argue your persuasion will be far more effective if you understand why they're over here at A,
Hmm.
why they have a certain viewpoint, but you want to persuade them to move over to a different viewpoint. So it's an art I learned partially because of my career in the military. I had a responsibility to understand the Soviet bloc, how the Soviet bloc thinks, how the Russians think, because God forbid someday I was going to have to go tete-a-tete against them on some European battlefield. Thankfully, that never occurred. But the theory behind it is understanding why, how that country thinks, why they do the things they do, and how they see the world. What does global peace look like to the Russian government of the day? Because the governments do change, but the Russian
Hmm.
government of the day, what does global peace look like to them? Because that's not what the Americans think global peace is,
Yeah.
right? Those are two different things. You have to get away from the idea that the American version is right and the Russian version is wrong. Because if you stay with that, you'll never understand. And I could
Yeah.
even go so far, and I'll just say this one last. I could go as far as to say that's a lot of reason why people just disagree because of ideological positions now,
Yeah.
because we lost the ability to just accept that somebody has a different point of view than
Yes.
me.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
not crazy. They're not nuts. They're not an idiot. They just
Yes.
have a different point of view.
Yeah. 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 Interesting because among the things that I read over the weekend, there's this great statement that just left me laughing, almost falling off my chair because I do this all the time, and I think many of us do. Yelling at traffic doesn't make it move faster.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so taking it from the point of view of my position as the center of the universe doesn't mean the universe accepts my position as the
And as the
center of
center.
the
Yep.
universe.
Yep.
So we do live and work out of what the cognitive bias of naive realism. The naive realism is that everybody sees the world the exact same way. This is it. It's fundamental. All the laws of nature are the laws of nature, and they're absolute, without realizing that most of the laws of nature are human-made, because nature doesn't have laws. Nature is chaos, wonderful chaos. Nature has structure. Nature has patterns, but not laws.
No.
So if you look at a flower and you say, wow, this is incredibly beautiful because we are seeing patterns. Nature will replicate those patterns with each flower, but nature isn't sitting there saying, oh, well, no, this is a rose. All roses look this way. Well, maybe, or maybe not.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
uh and so getting angry at the delayed flight doesn't make it take off sooner, kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
You can do whatever you want, and what we often enough don't understand, or maybe it's the comfort level we're pursuing. We believe in universals. There's universal truth, is universal everything, and it applies to absolutely everybody, no matter what context or cultural difference or whatever. There's even a sense that all language is the same because we all mean the same thing by the languages that we use. No, no, it doesn't work that way. And so it's that struggle that we have between what I call relativism and being relativistic. Relativism is okay, and this is the other side. The situation is going to give rise to the truth of the situation or of reality or whatever. And you go, wait, whoa, wait a minute. I bring to any decision my entire history, my life, my cultural DNA, my educational DNA. And while I am willing to listen, I also have a perspective where I'm not necessarily going to be persuaded.
Yeah.
And I have that right. not to
Yep.
be persuaded. So it's the huge complexity of being human.
And it's the other part of it that I was interested in. Why are we trying to persuade people?
Oh,
And it
yeah.
gets back to an article that I wrote a couple of weeks ago about our innate or inherent, depending how you look at it, desire to be right.
Yes.
This need that I think has been fueled by the fact that the internet has brought more people to soapboxes that probably shouldn't. But anyhow, free speech is what it is nowadays. But the fact that we have this, I have a point I want to get across. I would
Hmm.
like the opportunity to get my point across. But is my point trying to prove to everybody that I am correct and to prove that everybody else is wrong? Or am I trying to present my viewpoint and my idea on a subject matter? And my personal experience, having half a dozen recent conferences under my belt, is it's more than a plurality or skewed towards they are absolutely convinced that they are correct and that the rest of us just have to be nudged more and brought along
Yeah.
more. And
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
maybe you're lacking just a little bit more
Yeah.
information to
Yeah.
help you
Yeah.
get up over the
Yeah.
hump.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I've given you the correct idea. You haven't accepted it. So the failure lies in you for not accepting it. So maybe you're a bit stubborn, or I just got to give you a little bit more, help you get over the hump. Um, the idea of somebody making an informed decision, looking at the same set of evidence that you have, but have come to a different conclusion. That's not possible
No,
because
of course.
I'm right.
Yeah.
And so but I've read it all the time. So I emphatically say that when I give presentations at conferences, I start off with, hi, blah, blah, blah. I'm not correct. I'm not here to persuade you that I'm absolutely certain. This is what I've learned.
Yeah.
And let me
Yeah.
explain to you
Yeah.
why I think it's
Yeah.
something you should consider
Yeah.
in your life and in your operations and your activities in your professional life. And I've got some evidence why I think this way, but I'm not
Right.
here to tell you I'm the correct, and I don't want a cheerleading squad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is one thing I did with my students on the last, because I teach an online course in emergency management. And one of the tasks set up from the previous professor was to comment on other students' posts because we
Mm.
can't have that one-to-one dialogue because we're not in the classroom together.
Mm.
So
Mm.
everybody required to post and everybody was required to comment on other people's posts, right? It was kind of like, I got to make you get engaged. This is your engagement points. Well, I called it after week one. It was nothing but a cheerleading exercise. It was everybody telling everybody how wonderful they were, how insightful their comments were, and how they had made them pause a thought. And I just threw a big can of BS into the middle of that and said, okay, we're wasting each other's time here. For you grandstanding and cheerleading your colleague and telling them they have a great point. No, they didn't have a great point. It was poorly supported. You should have pointed out the fact that they made several statements without any evidence. You all
Mm-hmm.
read the same thing, and what you read didn't have any evidence to support what they said.
Mm-hmm.
So I found it challenging because now what I make them is they have to answer, but their answer has to challenge the position the individual put in. They're
Yeah.
not allowed to support it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's become a much more difficult
Yes. It
challenge
is.
for the students to
Yes.
do that
Yes. Yes.
because even if it's a position they hold as well,
Yes.
they're required by lottery and by randomness. They get
Yes.
selected to comment on X number of people. They have to disagree with things that they agree with and provide evidence for it.
Yep. Yep.
And I find it a far more valuable exercise than just cheerleading your
Yes.
colleagues. But
Yes.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
there is a more than a plurality of people in the professional world who just have some desire to be proven right. I don't know why. Is it validation? I'm not sure.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, that's something that is worthy of exploration. We in the facilitation world that I'm in, where we present, 5-day, or we facilitate 5-day sessions. And we haven't done it in a long time, at the end say, so what went well, what didn't go
Yeah.
well?
Yeah.
And After a while, I got so tired of the ear candy. That's what we used to call it.
Oh, no,
Ear
I know.
candy.
I
It,
know.
it was a case of, I don't really give a damn if you liked it or didn't like it.
Yeah.
I don't care. I actually now have an attitude, and it may be arrogant, it may be pompous. I don't care. There you go. I'm saying it again. I don't care. This is how I conduct my life. You either take it or don't take it. Either you accept it or you don't. And by the way, you don't have to accept it. I want to challenge you to think, full
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
And if in your thought process you actually say, Victor, you're wrong, then my response to you is explain.
Yeah.
Evidence might be a problem because we're in a dialogue, but it's a case of show me,
The
explain.
why. Just
Yeah.
give me the why.
Well, yeah.
In your words.
Tell me what your perspective is that
Yeah.
says you are upset potentially by what I'm saying or what I'm challenging you to think about. Don't give me ear candy. I'm not interested. And I love that phrase, ear
Yeah,
candy.
yeah, no, no, it's a
It's
good one.
brilliant. It's brilliant. But it's the origins of, that's almost the question that we're bouncing back and forth. What's the origins of the need to be right? The need
Yeah.
to be, or the alternative to that is the need to be correct,
Yes.
with or without
They
proof.
seem to be correct.
Yes. Well, with or without proof
Yeah.
doesn't mean we're actually correct,
No,
but
no,
we
no, no.
need to be seen to
Yeah.
be correct. And I hate to say it, but it's one of my favorite, dead horses that I like to beat, is the education system. You
Hmm.
either get 100% or you don't. And if you don't get 100%, that means you didn't get all the right answers.
Yeah.
So we're trained at a very early age through systems that what constitutes what is right. It's the right answer.
Yeah.
And so that creates a mindset, not just, getting the right math, 2 + 2 = 4, but it's a mindset that I always have to present myself as being correct.
Yeah.
And well, at what point do we get people to reevaluate that in such a way that they are open to the possibility that being correct isn't really useful? But notice I didn't say that open to the possibility that they're wrong.
Yeah.
It's not the point. The
Yeah.
point is it's not a useful exercise. All right. To always, always be correct.
Well, you just get an echo chamber.
Exactly.
Because if you're looking for that kind of validation, you end up finding and seeking out sources and other people that think the same way you do.
Yes.
Right? It's like there's one specific disaster conference in Canada that I don't attend anymore because it was a cheerleading session. Everybody would get up and say exactly what the field wants. Nobody would get up and challenge the thinking in the field.
Yeah.
Nobody would get up and come up with innovative, disruptive ideas. Like I got into an exchange earlier this week on the use of artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, it's here, it's present, it's
Mm-hmm.
the future.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, kind of was based upon the Canadian government has finally just decided to set up an institute to look at the safety concerns of AI. Forget how the governance system can leverage AI for
Mm-hmm.
policy development, policy implementation, policy evaluation, all the
Mm-hmm.
wonderful things AI could do. The
Mm-hmm.
only thing that they're worried about is the safety concerns of AI.
Yeah.
5 years after the technology has started to infiltrate the research and governance networks.
Yeah.
5 years later.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nobody cares whether you like AI. Like that's an irrelevant position. Feelings or don't matter. And I don't mean to be abrupt
No,
about
no,
that, but they generally don't.
no.
Um,
Oh,
it's here. So how do we use it? And then again, this goes back to my first point. If you don't understand what A is, and you don't under AI is, and you don't understand what the limitations of it are, how can you criticize it? How can you persuade people to a different opinion? It gets back to that understanding of, tell me your why. If you disagree with me, tell me your why. I
yeah,
want to
yeah,
understand
yeah.
why you don't think what I'm saying
Yeah,
is in line with what you think. And it's the
yeah,
example I gave on a podcast I recorded this morning was from a political sense, I'm a libertarian. And then there's the progressive wing. And I was talking about how somebody in the progressive wing and somebody in the libertarian wings, one's not the enemy of the other. They just look at and they see society envisioned in a different way, in a different role for government, and a different responsibility for the individual. But you can't really criticize one or the other unless you really actually understand what their view is and the why behind it.
hmm
Like, why do you think this way? Why do you believe? Educate, like you said. Tell me, tell me, give me the why that
yeah,
backs up in your own words.
yeah, yeah. Oh
This
yeah,
isn't about quoting articles, but in
yeah,
your own words, give me the why that you've chosen this position, or you have this position, or you
yeah,
believe this to
yeah.
be true, so I
Which
can understand
yeah,
you.
exactly, so that I can understand it.
Yeah.
Not understanding it is not synonymous with saying, "Oh, oh, I'll surrender my
Oh,
position."
yeah. It's not agreeing.
No,
It's
no,
just
no, stop. It's not
understanding.
agreement.
Yeah.
Let's stop here. Part of it as an observer of human behavior, and this is if I consider myself, if I consider any talent I have, so I like to watch people and I like to listen. I personally think the reason why we always need to be correct and right, not just because of the school system, but we're afraid not to be. So there's a fundamental fear of being wrong, not just because you're not going to get an A on your essay or in your exam, but because someone's going to point a finger at you.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. You're opening yourself to criticism. That's one of it, one side of it. The other is, so there's a fear there. The other side of it is you're surrendering control. And control is an illusion to begin with. Okay. As soon as one, and you don't have to be a Buddhist or anything like that in order to say that control is an illusion. When was the last time we controlled anything? I mean, in all practical reasons and practical situations, do we really control anything? Can I really control the, quality of service I get on the TTC?
That's a
No,
small amount.
not even a small amount. This is bigger than I am, and it's
Oh,
more
yeah.
ridiculous than I could possibly ever be. So what do? I just shrug and say, well, take my time, making sure I have enough time to get to my destination by uh, the deadline, period. If that
Yeah.
means I have to leave 20 minutes earlier, I'll leave 20 minutes earlier. That's reality. You know, uh, and it's called compensation. You know,
Yeah.
you do I try to change the system? Spare me. I'm too small.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, well, I'm also too small. I'm a gnat, I'm the annoyance factor for any system. That's what we all are. Now, there's accepting the reality, if I could use that term, of actually who you are.
Oh, that's a crazy reference because, well, they say the scariest thing for a human is to be alone with their thoughts
Mm-hmm.
without any distraction.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you hear yourself and you hear what goes around you. But it's very much like the Stoics say. You're in control of very little. You're literally only in control of what you say and what you do. You're not even in control of your own body. Your own
Mm-hmm.
body can fail you even though you do all the right things.
Yep.
The only thing that you have is emotional intelligence and control over what you say and what you do. That's it. Everything else you can influence,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't control. Like I can try to persuade somebody about subject matter or about service levels on the TTC. I can try to influence something, but I'll never control it. I'll never be in it that even if I was the head of the TTC, I don't control
No.
customer service because I don't deliver it
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
the head of the TTC.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It
and I've met the fire Brand, I'll call her, an incredibly brilliant woman and a 100-mile-an-hour type A personality who's the emergency manager for the TTC.
Oh,
I've met across her a couple of times in conferences, and she's the right person for that type of job by far.
yeah,
Well fitted because she's right up in your face type of type A personality. But it's people get worried, and we don't. To your previous point, we don't celebrate failure. That's part of the problem. We grew up in a
oh,
culture where we don't celebrate failure.
right.
And they're trying to do it in more and more institutions, especially in military learning institutions, of where we want people to fail and fail often
Yeah,
because you learn when you fail. You
yeah.
don't learn when you succeed. If everybody tells you you're a hero and you get participation medals and you're wonderful at your job,
No, no. Yeah,
that doesn't work. People need to fail and they need to see their failures, accept their failures. But at the same time, that culture requires an organization that doesn't subsequently then beat somebody down or hold them back
exactly.
because they failed.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's the part that's
Yeah,
tough for organizations
yeah,
to learn. They can say, oh, yeah, we celebrate failure. You failed to meet the standard, but that's
yeah,
okay. You had great effort. Well, guess what? Because you didn't meet the standard, you're
yeah,
not getting this.
yeah. It's interesting because not that I'm a military person, but I know quite a number of people in military careers, U.S., Canadian, and actually out of some of the European countries. So my job takes me to places I often enough don't even want to admit, but there I am. And what's fascinating is listening to friends who have either an association with or knowledge of SEALs, the U.S. SEALs group, and it's a classic understanding of who survives SEALs in their training, in their what would be their weeding out period. And what's fascinating is it's not the strongest, right? It's not the most physical. It's not even the most mentally focused. It's the companionship where you actually not only survive, but you strengthen each other
Yep.
to get through the mess, the nastiness, if you will. And the nastiness is intentional to see who, not to be cruel, but to see who is going to work with whom in what we in business call the communitarian cooperating process. It's about cooperation, not about me being better than everybody else because I'm correct and you're all wrong.
Yep. Yeah, it's a process oriented because everybody who shows up for special operations training is already at the 98th percentile in physical fitness anyhow.
Yeah, yeah,
They're weeded out on day one if somehow they got snuck through selection process without being. So
yeah,
everybody's already at the same physical fitness level,
yeah,
reasonably close.
yeah, yeah,
Um, in the first couple of days, those with mental that can't hack it, lack of mental toughness, they're gone very quickly. And
yeah.
then from that point on, you're absolutely right. It's about the strength of human relationships. It's about people who have the ability, the sense of, or the predisposition to connect and the willingness to connect with other humans and then support those other humans in very short order.
Mhm.
Right. So when you see your individual really having a problem holding up their part of the boat, you hold up both your parts of the boat
That's right.
with the best effort you can because you see. It's the old adage of, a successful marriage is never going to be 50-50.
Yeah,
Some people are going to be at 30% that day. And when they're at 30, you need to be at
exactly.
70.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so those type of organizations do really, really well because they're looking for the personality to
Mhm.
meet the task. Right. It's people always say, what's the best training for business? And a lot of leading books will say it's liberal arts because I can treat a monkey how to do an MBA process. That's not hard. Right. It's not hard. I can
We
teach
are
a monkey how to
recording.
do.
We are recording this, so
Oh,
this.
I know. This is why I get my MBA friends fired up all the time, right? I said I can get a textbook and get an MBA, but the
Yes.
value of the MBA is not in your being able to develop strategic plans.
No.
It's the working at that tempo, at that level, with people of similar type of pedigree, and building companionship, cooperation, and working and achieving a goal together. That's what the value of the MBA is, not the what you'll find in a textbook. I mean, I could buy a handful of textbooks and get the same technical knowledge that I would learn at an MBA without having to spend any of the money.
In the process of the Logistics Institute evolving around supply chain, global supply chain logistics, as well as leadership, one of the things that I came across and I found really fascinating, and I tried to build parts of our program around it. And that is a quote that from I think she's British, where she said, "Strategic planning is an oxymoron. There's no such thing as strategic planning. There's planning and there's strategy, and to mix the two of them up is a fallacy.
Yeah.
Because strategy is about strategic thinking. Planning is about putting a process together in a step-by-step way in order to implement it. Strategy is, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Planning is, how are we going to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. And if you don't get into that distinction, then you get the typical blather that comes out of almost any business program. I'm trying not to say it all. That you're going to be awarded with your EMBA, and that's a nice little gold star on your report card and a pat on the back and sometimes on the head, and go and be somebody as a senior person at a bank or a big corporation,
Yeah.
because that's the career path that you chose or were sent on, depending on who's paying the $150,000 for your executive MBA. So it's that pride of place, which gets us back to the need to be perceived to control, which is coupled with that. Now I'm pulling all the words together, which is coupled with the need to be correct, which in many senses, if you're at a senior level in an organization, it's the need to be directive, not to manage, but to direct. That's different. And all of that is tied up with what I consider, maybe incorrectly, but hey, I consider our fundamental fear of being wrong.
Yep.
You come out of a program from any university whatsoever, you go through a PhD process. You and I both know what that means. What are you actually doing in the PhD process? You've taken a position. That's your thesis topic. This is the problem that you're going to look at. You're going to analyze all the literature around it, which was the part of the PhD process that always drove me crazy, because you could never cover all of it anyway.
Nope.
Your point of doing lit analysis is to prove everybody inadequate, not necessarily wrong, because they don't see the problem the way you do.
Yep.
Okay.
Your new innovative lens.
Yeah. And then you write it up, having evidence, proving your point, after you've decimated the world of thought prior to your great idea. And the rest of your life is meant, as you go for tenure somewhere in particular, defending your position against everybody else.
Yep.
And
you've dug in, as we say in the Army. You've dug in and you're stuck.
You're stuck. You have to do it. You can't do anything else.
Right? But this is the point, and I love this debate I have with people of science all the time. Science in general is the best that we know right now.
Yes.
And at one time, everybody was convinced based upon evidence that the world was flat and the sun revolved around the earth. Right? We learn new things, hopefully, most of us, not everybody. There's still a couple hangers on, but we generally understand that science and knowledge changes, which means our position changed. And it doesn't mean that I was wrong before. It means that we've learned new things that we didn't understand before that allows us to see things through a different perspective. So now the position changes,
Mhm.
right? But people are always like, was I wrong? Well, to be wrong, you have to look at reasonably convincing data sets and come to some different conclusion, right? It's actually pretty hard to be wrong. But having a different lens or a different viewpoint on it, whatever your crisis may be, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's quite. I don't know how we overcome the idea that we have to celebrate failure and tell people it's okay to fail, and we want you to fail. Like when you're in business, if you lose if you lose a couple of big sales accounts, you're probably not there long.
No. Yeah.
You're not there long because the companies want somebody who wins all the time.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
nobody wins all the time.
No,
Nobody does.
no.
Right? Generals don't win all the time. You know, supply chain leaders don't win all the time. You make a call on an investment and a change in some part along your supply chain, you make an investment and it turns out not to really be what you think.
That's right.
Do you
But
fire the person or do you, based upon the evidence as they knew it at that time, it was a logical, intelligent conclusion to come to? It's like the people who made massive investments in the fall of 2019. We had a pandemic. They didn't make a dumb move.
no,
They weren't wrong at the time. They
no.
didn't realize the end of globalization will be incredibly accelerated.
Yep.
Here we are. The people didn't make a mistake. It probably cost hundreds of millions of dollars across companies, but we don't accept the fact that we're human
Well,
and make mistakes,
yeah. What
fail.
I find, yeah, what I find fascinating about all that is the unwillingness to learn from, the mistake. If you lose a sale, for me, again, to use that terrible W word, why did we lose the sale? What
Yeah.
went wrong here? And if you can't learn from that experience and you just simply dismiss it, then everybody has wasted their time.
Yeah.
Lee Iacocca, was it before? It was before Lee Iacocca became president of. He actually was a vice president. He made a major, major decision for the company, and it blew up in his face. Whoever the president was at the time, he actually writes, Iacocca writes this in his biography. Whoever the president was at the time of, the company, he thought, well, he was called in, come to my office, and he was ready to be fired. And the president turned around and said, why would I fire you?
Yeah.
He said, if you haven't learned anything, no, actually, he rephrased it. I've invested huge amounts of money in you. I've paid you mega salaries.
Exactly. Why would I turf you?
Why would I turf you at this point? Now, go back to your desk and do something different or do it better or whatever language you want to do, but I'm not firing you. I invested in you. Now you go, oh, okay, wow, that's pretty there's leadership right there. That's a, bite the bullet, learn from, the mistake, and make sure it's not about not doing it again. That's in itself interesting because who knows about how the world turns to.
Circumstances. Yeah. You can't
You
govern
can't.
that.
There's a volatility here. You
Yeah.
can't predict the future. However, if you haven't learned from the past, then you've got problems. We have this cliche of if you don't understand history, you're going to repeat it. And I love that because I'm a historian and I remember listening to this in the lectures and so on and so forth. And it took me a while to realize we always repeat history, damn it. I don't give a damn who you are. We never deviate from the screw ups that happened before. Why? Because you're not understanding human behavior.
Yep.
It's not about history. It's about behavior.
About human behavior and why people make the decisions they do and what things influence their
Exactly.
positions, right? And it's the same as sometimes when you're like for your sales reference, um, sometimes you put together a great portfolio and a
Mhm.
great offer, and the offer itself really was the best that your company could do in this situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
The fact that you were not selected didn't mean you failed because you
No.
couldn't offer anything better. That was the best that you could do that fit in the vision of the company,
Yeah.
and the contractor didn't take it, right? And that doesn't mean you failed, right? It means that, that could be a wonderfully defensible proposition or proposal that was put forward, exactly
Right.
what we stand for in
Yeah.
the company.
Yeah.
Somebody wanted something different that we couldn't get to,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's great. Great. We're not going to compromise who we are just to get a deal. We're not going to cut corners. This is how we do business.
Yeah.
It'd be like somebody trying to say, "Hey, listen, I very interested in your P-log program. I want the same content. I'm willing to give you 2 days, and I want the certification." And for the same, and you're like, "Well, no, our program is this. Our standards are such.
Right.
We do this for a very good set of reason. We've got decades of experience behind it, and there's
Yeah.
an ethical standard that we meet."
Yeah. Right.
You didn't fail because you didn't give that contract what the individual demanded.
Yep.
You stood by a standard that made rational sense for what you do. And that's another standard. And
Yeah.
I just find it very interesting whether I'm dealing in the preparedness space, whether I dabble a bit in the international politics space, to just kind of stick around and say, we do a lot better as a group if we stop trying to be right and
Yeah.
we started and accepted that a disagreement is okay.
Yes.
It's okay to just have nothing
Yes.
more
Yes.
than a disagreement. It's
Yeah.
not going to get solved. We
Yep.
have two different opinions on it,
Yep.
but that's fine. We still
Yeah.
hang out. We still go golf together. We still
Yeah.
ride the
Yeah. Yeah.
TTC and
Yeah. Yeah.
complain together, whatever.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
have difference of opinion. I have many colleagues who I have very different opinions on things, but we don't walk around championing or parading like I am correct. You've
Well,
just failed to see the light.
getting to, the root of some of this stuff about correctness, we also have a misconception of what constitutes authoritative understanding. There are lots of stories around this. But I remember in the past, among the many things I dabble in is reading some people who are scientists. We are talking, white coat
Yeah.
scientists who actually think about science, not just do lab work.
Yeah.
Okay. And there was one, Imre Lakatos, and it took me a while as you were talking. I had to write that down. I had to remember his name, Imre Lakatos. And he actually said the whole purpose of the scientific method, which we think is the only way to think, is to prove the last thing we've discovered wrong.
Yeah.
So if we are going to progress in the world of science, your constant effort is to prove that what we agreed to up to this point is no longer adequate. And here's the evidence
Yeah.
that says so. If we don't do that, his sense was, then we get stuck, or we're in a trench. That's it.
Yep.
We don't have to go any farther. I thought of this as you were talking about, 2019, then followed by 2020, and the end of globalization. Globalization's not over. It's morphed into something totally different from what we thought it should be up to 2020.
Yeah. Should be.
It's still there. It doesn't look the same. It's wearing a different dress, if I could be so weird. It's, it's got a different, look to it. It's no longer just, offshore. It's offshore, near shore, onshore. It's got multiplicities. It focuses on postponement as a way of conducting business, as a way of handling inventory. And I'm going, people think it's dead. No, it's not. It's just repositioned itself. And what you have to do is be a little more astute about who is the controlling economy, leader in the world, of
Yep.
which I would suspect there are no more major leaders, but who are the emerging leaders in the economy of the world.
Yep.
I look to places like Africa. That's the future.
Yeah, or South America.
South America up to a point, depends on whether they actually get their act together. South America, I love South Americans because I love visiting, I love going, I love talking, I love teaching and all that stuff. And I really have a great time when I'm in South America. I still scratch my head sometimes when I think, what's next? And give you the example. I remember I may have mentioned this in a previous session, that I was a guest of the Ministerio de Trabajo in Argentina to come down and give some workshops. And then I returned a second time in order to do some teaching. And so when I arrived in Buenos Aires, I was met by people who were representing the ministry. And I remember one young fellow who I'm not too sure whether he was there to shadow me or was there to make sure I didn't get lost, kind
Or
of.
both.
A little bit of both. This is post-junta.
Yeah.
Post-junta. So this is the first elected government in a post-junta Argentina. There are certain things you did not talk about and certain things you did, you just
Yeah,
move on.
exactly.
You just move on. Right?
Yeah.
I remember he and I were having the typical afternoon for an Argentine is, they're either so European or so whatever. And that is around 3 o'clock, you have to have your cup of coffee and your dolce, your dessert. And Argentines love their dessert. They're more Italian than most. And so we were sitting in a cafe, and I don't drink coffee in the afternoon, but we were sitting and we were talking. And two things struck me immediately. Three things, actually. One, there was this huge billboard of the Marlboro Man. And I started laughing, and everybody smokes in Argentina. And he said, I said, what are you laughing at? I said, we haven't sold Marlboros in North America in, I don't know, decades. Or if you do, it's the underground. That man's dead. We're talking about the Marlboro Man.
Yeah, the cowboy guy.
The
Yeah.
cowboy guy.
Yeah, the
And
original
there he
one.
is, all over the place. I said, he's not alive anymore. And I think he died of cancer. So and of course, this young man takes his pack of Marlboro out, and I go, oh, okay, sorry about that. Two other things that I remember were very prominent. First and foremost, it's the whole process of we don't understand this in North America, of voting. Argentina is the first country that has an internal passport process. At a certain age, you receive a passport. It's got all of your identity. It's your identity papers.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you're asked, you have to produce them. Right? But in the back, it also has the dates when you voted. And if you don't vote, you have broken the law.
Yeah.
So there's a whole history of your voting.
Hopefully not how you voted, not just
right.
that you voted.
That's right. No. It's a so-called private or whatever you want to call it. I love the so-called private because it doesn't exist. But the other thing that became interesting around all that was something you just mentioned, and that is the fear of being caught with your own thoughts.
Yeah.
In isolation.
Yeah.
And during the junta, the young people, especially university people, were thrown out of planes and, into the ocean and died. The journalists were all arrested. And there was this journalist who was interviewed many times in the New York Times, who said the worst thing about being in isolation in prison was you began to believe your own thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said that was frightening.
Yeah.
You actually thought that every thought was absolutely true because you were not bouncing your ideas off of.
No, yeah, you had no rational soul to bounce it off. You had, and this is why, to bring it back to my genre in the preparedness world, we keep advocating that you won't be successful on your own. I know there's a lot of glorification in books and TV shows about the lone person running around the woods and surviving, but the lone wolf dies. The pack thrives. Humanity requires each other. We require the interaction. And if we understand that, then that makes a lot of other things equal. But it's also the same thing for echo chambers and beliefs, is the fact that what we don't train is what I've tried to train my children is to actively ensure that your circle is occupied by people with different positions as you, both economic, because political ideology is one thing. I mean, you can't debate religion with people. It is what it is. But when you think political and economic, leaving the cultural side out, because that's a ticking time bomb in a lot of places. But if we just look at political and economic, to make sure that you surround yourself in a friend group with people that have divergent opinions from yours. Because then we learn to understand each other better. It leads to less conflict. It leads to better cooperation. It leads to better understanding. And it lessens the need for you to be right because, you're like me, I'm a libertarian and I've got a friend who donates a significant amount of money to the NDP every year. We're still friends. We have different political viewpoints. We have different economic viewpoints. And we love to banter about them periodically. But we have figured out how to still maintain a great positive friendship without having to be mirrors of each other.
The root of that, this is my insight, and it could also just be my opinion, but let me at least position it as an insight. Is it's something I when I talk to leaders of business and otherwise on a one-to-one basis, young people in particular looking for career advice. I have a whole range of people that I talk to on a regular basis, sometimes on an irregular basis, but just on occasion. And often enough, I say to people that one of the key virtues, if you will, or values, maybe it's better to call it a value, is humility. Now, they look at me and they go, okay, you can see the glazing over the eye.
Exactly.
Humility. What is this going to be? A religious experience?
Where are we going with this?
Now, do I have to genuflect? And I look at them and going, stop. I can just see it by looking at your eyes, what you're thinking. Humility is an honest appraisal and recognition of who you are, both your positive and your negative capabilities. Absolutely embracing the fact that you are capable and incapable at the same time. And if you're not honest with yourself, humility is equated to honesty. If you're not honest with yourself, then you have the misconception of being the be-all and end-all, who's going to be the survivalist. And you just go, what the hell's wrong with you?
Why?
I had dinner with a colleague last night, and as we left the restaurant, it rained like hell here in the city. And thankfully I had an umbrella, but it was useless. But that's neither here nor there. And as he was driving me home in his Porsche.
Nice.
No.
No.
Somebody my age does not try to get into a Porsche.
Well, that's true.
in any sense of the gracefulness words. Just no way. But both of us commented about, he said, I know people who actually got stuck in their cars, in particular older cars that are a little bit lower to the ground, so, closer to the ground, in the face of a flood. And he said the craziness of that, stupidity is the word he used, of that is a flood is not a sudden thing. You know it's coming. Okay.
Yeah.
What motivated you to point your vehicle directly in at the flood and drive towards it? What is it that you think you were capable of doing? And then I think of, the floods in Spain, Valencia, and so on and so forth, and the hundreds of people who died. And I asked myself, what were you thinking?
Yep.
Did you not know that, that a flood was, I can understand a tsunami. It's a little bit sudden, but if you build your house on the coast anyway, why would this be so strange? That there's an erosion possibility, there's a flooding, there's a tsunami possibility, there's a hurricane possibility, there's a monsoon possibility. But why are you surprised?
And they're always surprised. They're always surprised. It's always like it's never happened before, even though it has several times. And if you live in a town and you saw many of the pictures from areas of Spain and you look at the flooding and you have large amounts of water going down tiny little streets, moving around buildings where cars had no other place to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you knew that volume of rain was coming.
Mm-hmm.
What were you doing out in your car?
Yeah.
But that's the point. People don't make that connection. They
No.
don't think like that. They
No.
go out and do about their normal day and they figure, I've bought this car with all-wheel drive and I can
Yep.
make it through that flood in the Dog
Exactly.
Valley Parkway.
Yes.
But sooner or later, I'm going to be the guy with four-way flashers on because apparently that helps once you're flooded.
Oh, yes.
I
Totally.
love that when they remember to put their four-way flashers on before they
Yep.
abandon their vehicle.
Yes.
It's we don't. It's back to the big question. We don't know why people don't make the logical connection that a massive, just like they had in British Columbia in the last 48 hours, a bomb cyclone come up, massive winds, like hurricane force winds were coming. They had 24, 36 hours notice this was going to happen. It's something that does happen reasonably frequency on the West Coast. And people are upset that trees were down and roads were closed. What did you think was going to happen on the coast of North America?
Yeah.
Like, seriously. And
Yeah.
oh, by the way, why were you not ready to ride out
Yeah.
this whole thing? And there was an example of a very prominent Instagram influencer who had their wedding planned in Florida in a location that was no longer there after the hurricane hit Tampa. Their entire venue disappeared. It was gone. And so they made a case about it. Of course, they used the hashtag wedding is off and everybody
Yeah.
clicked on
Yeah.
it to see what happened. And they were using it and great on them. Great use of social media marketing. But it was that like the hurricane was coming.
Yeah.
What was your
Yep.
plan
Yep.
if the hurricane hit the location and your location was no longer available? Why don't people sit back and have that short 5 to 7 minute reflective discussion when major significant events like this are pending?
Well,
I do. Maybe it's the
yeah.
genre I'm in. I don't
Yeah. Yeah.
understand why people don't.
Well,
And then cry when it hurts them.
well, one of the great advantages of connectivity, online connectivity, whether it's Wi-Fi, social media, or whatever, is that we actually have access to information about what's happening around the world. Okay, it's what you do with it
Oh, yeah.
that that you just go, what part of the closet are you living in? We live in a world of exposed information. You're exposed to it 24/7.
Yeah.
You cannot even get away from it, even if you wanted to. Um, and then you sit back and you go, well, I'm going to, continue my wedding plans in Tampa, despite the fact that there's a hurricane of X caliber headed that way. What did you think was going to happen? Okay? And you're never mind. I mean, I scratched my head.
In the Army, we used to call it a warning order. Be prepared too. When events look like they would change or something might be coming, we would just send out to the troops a warning order. Be prepared to do the following likely task. You're not moving. You're not doing anything yet. Just get your headspace, as we used to say in a car reference, get your headspace and timing working.
Yes.
Start thinking, get the
Yeah.
brain back box moved on. So somebody would have said, hey, listen, I hope this hurricane misses. But if it does destroy the venue and the venue sends me an email, here's our exact plan we're about to execute as soon as we get that email.
It's called.
Why is that hard?
I don't know. I don't know why. And even more remarkable is a reference I always use as a non-sports person called pivoting. Okay.
Yeah.
We here in Canada are absolutely glued to games. Okay. It may not be football as the Americans play it, but there's a certain, ethical or not ethical, ethnic approach to football that just rife through the country, right? There are games that people absolutely must see at 2 o'clock in the morning as it's being played somewhere in God's country.
Yeah.
So has anybody ever noticed or learned from just watching, observing a little better than watching, that those athletes pivot? They change course in the middle of a play because that is how you actually survive and win. Is it such a mystery that pivoting in your own decision process is something we don't consider?
Yeah.
There is weather, climate change or otherwise. I don't really care whether you believe it or don't believe it. It's not a belief system. It's not a religion, but that's your problem if that's the way you want to approach it. There are things that have changed radically in the world. All right, put that aside. Hurricanes are hurricanes. Okay. There are always going to be hurricanes. There are decades of hurricanes. Okay. It goes back.
Yeah.
Since, before they started recording the weather patterns, right? This is not new to human experience.
No.
But for whatever reason, we live in a headspace of comfort that seems to say it'll never happen to me.
Yep.
And that's the ultimate nonsense of an everyday life. It'll never happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an ostrich type of thinking. It's not even avoidance behavior, because avoidance is acknowledging that it may occur, but I'm just going to choose not to do anything about it.
That's right.
Apathy is, I know what is coming. I know it's going to smoke the heck out of me, but whatever. It's too big. It's too,
what the hell? I might as well just sit and
right. I'm going to light my cigar as the 1,000-foot wave comes in and finally crack the expensive bottle of scotch. Why not?
Yeah.
But no, it's the same thing that the issue we struggle with. What is it that triggers people to behavior change? Now, it's not the same for everybody. There's no magical trigger.
No.
But when you step away from the individual and you look at a population set,
yes,
that's better and easier to use if you're trying to influence larger sections of behavior. What is it? What is the trigger point? What is the hook that is going to influence them to change their behavior? What is the persuasive key going to be? And again, it's not going to be the same for each group. It's not going to be the same for each problem set, but it's trying to figure out what that is. And I gave the example last week when we were talking about coming back from Banff conference and the fire chief having $1,000 available for home
Yes.
inspections to get them
Yes.
fireproof,
Yes.
free of charge, and he couldn't give away the money
No.
right after half the town burned because of a forest fire. So obviously, you know, it wasn't a question of the cost of having an inspection done because he was offering it for free. And so people still weren't getting it done. So trying to figure out what is it that gets them over the hump. A friend of mine expanded his social media platform when he was working for the government because he offered Starbucks cards. He had a weekly contest. He told the boss, I got 52 weeks. I want $20 a week in Starbucks cards. And he took them from a couple hundred to tens of thousands of followers because he was giving away something tangible that was a low door to entry, a low barrier to entry. It was easy for people to take up. They just simply had to answer a question and be randomly selected. He figured out the solution to get people on board.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean the $20 Starbucks card solves every issue, but
No.
it's trying to figure out that issue specific and population specific
Yeah.
Item, idea, strategy, hook, sales platform, whatever you want to call it, that will initiate the beginning of that behavioral change.
Well, one of the things I think that one of the things that I think we are also thinking around is we live in very comfortable situations. Life is very comfortable,
Very.
and unless we are scared shitless about something, and I'm not going to apologize for that word, we won't do anything. And even worse, because of our sense of comfort, our embracing comfort, we're also thinking that it's someone else's problem. Let me rephrase that. It's not someone else's problem. Someone else is going to take care of it.
Someone else's responsibility.
Yes. We live in a caretaker comfort world.
Mm-hmm.
Someone is going to take care of it.
Yeah.
And it's also built around a sense of what I call white coat authoritarianism. The government exists in order to serve me, period, full stop. And if it doesn't, then okay, I'll whine about it. But it's still their responsibility. Right? They're going to do it. And I had an example of this. I was having dinner with a friend. She's 80. I'm not 80, but pretty close. And so we're having this great dinner together. And so we catch up maybe once every 3 weeks or so on. So what's happening with the family, what's happening with you, and so on. And it's not quite like two old people sitting in rocking chairs talking about their diseases, but it gets around to that. It's reality.
It's your shared reality.
It's shared reality. So she was having some physical problems and gynecological. And again, she's 80. And the tests came back, and the person in the white coat said, we detected some cells. We don't know what they mean. They're mystery cells. That was the name. Mystery cells. What the hell is a mystery cell? So there's something in your uterus that's a mystery cell. Our recommendation is hysterectomy. Period. Full stop. And she went, whoa, wait a minute. Stop. She said, first of all, given my blood pressure and heart conditions, said 4 to 5 hours under anesthesia is not going to do me any good. So that itself is questionable. The other is, okay, what's your familiarity talking to the doctor about these mystery cells? Well, former patient of mine had these, and she developed cancer, and she died of cancer. Geez, that's sad. How long did it take? 8 years. My friend just looked at the doctor and said, "You do know how old I am, don't
Exactly.
you?"
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you want me to undergo this procedure on the possibility that 8 years from now,
Yeah.
these might actually develop into cancer cells. Might. There are a lot of ifs
Yeah.
around that.
A lot of things have to line up.
And so she said, "Thank you very much. I'll get back to you." But under other circumstances, if you take it out of that particular story,
Yeah.
there's the person with the white coat. I'm the doctor here.
Yeah.
I know what's best. And we have to stop and think, why? Why do you know what's best for someone who lives in their own body?
And this is why we ran into so many fights during the pandemic about vaccine status, taking vaccines, etc., is that there was this overarching belief that a certain group of individuals had the final say. And we always, and the libertarian group that I run with, we always look at from the viewpoint of that the doctor, the white coat, the politician, the policy analyst, the research scientist exists in their position to provide us the best possible advice based upon what they know and their colleagues and all the information that they have at the time. Their job and responsibility being placed in that position to serve us, as you say in the government, is to provide us that advice. The decision of what to do to that advice is only responsible to the individual. And it's up to them to make the decision what to do with it. So the government's role is to provide to do all the necessary research to provide the great advice for people to choose. My mother is 84, has several different types of cancer, and every once in a while, one of the oncologists, better hematology or whatever, pop up and say, "Hey, like we really want to get in there and get after this." And my mother's family doctor is actually the one who stands up and says, "Let's be clear. Nature is going to take her long before any of these things do." And when my mother's 84 and has quite a number of health issues, it's about the quality in the years, not the years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah,
it's about saying, okay, you're absolutely right. It's
yeah.
like the doctor said to me, and we've talked about my kidney problems before. He said, if you were 84 or 83 sitting in an old folks home, I'd take it out. I'd just take your kidney out, but you're 53. And he
Yeah.
called me a young man, so like to repeat that as much as I can.
Oh, yes, of course.
But he said, a young man like yourself at 53, I'm not going to take it out unless I
No, no,
absolutely have to,
exactly.
because you've got, based upon the statistics, probably 30 more years.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So let's not put you behind the eight ball by
Yeah,
only giving you one
yeah,
of them when nature
yeah,
gave you two.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
But it's that idea of wanting to be right that is sometimes tied to positional authority.
yeah,
And I say this in my field of emergency management, that our best education is our best study and our best research is that about 30% of the population will respond to words of command, for lack of a better term, from people in a position of authority simply
yeah,
because they hold a title.
yes.
So when the director of public health comes up and says, this is what you must do, 30% of the population are going to go, right, roger that, get off, and they will execute it without question.
Mm-hmm,
The other 70% will be on a somewhat gradient
mm-hmm.
of agreement. To use a Kaner being a facilitator, you own Sam Kane's work on gradients of agreement.
Right.
But looking at what's the intent behind this? What's the
Mm-hmm.
message behind this? What's the motivation behind this? What are my options? People, the other 70% of the population does a personal analysis
Yeah.
on the situation. The problem we ran into, in my belief, in the pandemic is everybody who didn't follow the 30% was viewed as wrong and error and harmful.
Mm-hmm.
So that there was only one conclusion you could come to that would be deemed acceptable and correct in society. And everybody else somehow failed to meet the standard. And like we said before, we're wrong.
Yeah. Interesting in the spectrum support. I'll use that term. That again, they've done studies, and the analysis is 18% of any given population will be dead against anything you want to do. Period. Full stop. That's it. There'll be about 35% who'll be gung ho, and then there's the middle group. And I'm arithmetic. I have arithmetic problems. So I'm not even going to try to figure out what that middle is. They're the ones who are undecided, right? And so this is comes out in studies leading to change management processes in large companies. So you know you're going to have the 18% who are just going to say, you're nuts, go away, leave me alone. You're going to have the 35% who are going to say, oh, change, this could be interesting or good, or this, I might get an advantage here. And then you got the middle guys who are going, what do you want to do?
Why?
What? Huh?
Yeah.
Do I have to do what? Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So having said that, again, my own approach to the pandemic is, I felt, this is me, I felt that my commitment to the greater good of society was that I can't get sick. I'm of that age, unlike you being the young guy. I'm of that age where I'm the more vulnerable, possibly among the most vulnerable in society. So I thought, okay, I was given an opportunity to do the first one. Everything was, tickety-boo with the government and how it was all arranged. It was very simple. And I thought, so long as it's not asking me to climb a mountain in order to find out, where I'm going to do it. So I did the first one. Then the second one, and I was fine. I'm a fairly healthy person. Did the second one because I thought, okay, they're recommending that you do this. Well, actually, they were doing more than recommending. They were insisting that, especially the vulnerable population. I said, okay, that's my category. Then they came back and said, well, it's time for you to do the third one. And I started questioning. I said, okay, this is now becoming a pain in the ass. So, oh no, listen, I mean, I'm like my father. If it's a pain in the ass, I ain't doing it. I mean, he was a stubborn old Sicilian, and I'm no different. So I decided, okay, I went and I did it. I got sick. And I went, whoa, I'm usually I've got good stamina here. I can take most things and it won't make me ill. Third one, I got ill. I thought, so I began. I'm a fairly intelligent person on occasion. And I thought, well, now I think you have too much vaccine running through your system. And when it came to the third one, you had a reaction. Then the request was for the fourth one. And I said, no, you leave me alone.
We're done.
I got sick. That was the last one. I'm not doing it again. Now I get the annual. Oh, it's time for your annual. I said, well, why don't you just leave me alone? All right. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die. I'm not going to go out of my way. I'm not going to do any testing. I'm not going to shove things up my nose. I'm not going to try to figure out whether the cold that I have right now is COVID or it. Will you folks? As a friend of mine used to say, I'm able to sit up and take soup. Period.
Yeah, there are different standards, right? There are, and it's so true. I mean, my experience, I took the first two jabs because I was a 50-year-old with asthma. My age kept me, because of my age and my other general physical health, there was no need to get a vaccine whatsoever because of the effects of it. But because in my own personal medical situation, it made a world of sense for me to get it because having a reduced capability in my respiratory system, a respiratory disease of unknown nature, really at that time, was a pretty significant scare.
Sure.
I've never had anything after that, and I don't begrudge. I personally don't begrudge. I have family friends who looked at the circumstances that were presented to them, looked at the evidence, and decided that even the first one was not an appropriate medical intervention for themselves.
Yeah.
They've spent several years being called everything under the sun and labeled as everything under the sun. And this is where I get back to the idea of we don't have the skill set to agree to disagree, to understand that we have two different ways in looking at things, and that your neighbor is not necessarily wrong because they choose a different course of action
Right.
than you do. Because when we do that, we start polarizing society. We start identifying people. We
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
creating groups.
Yeah.
We start creating labels for groups. And
Yeah.
when we do that, we start seeing the polarization that's happened to our neighbors in the South,
Yeah.
which then is not impossible, but very difficult to recover from.
No, oh, yeah.
To
Well,
to bring, like, in Canada, we had I forget, I think it's Casey, the guy's last name, who tried to start a third federal party in the center. Obviously, he got next to no voices and nobody's paying any attention to him because it turns out it's a little harder than that to start a national federal party. But the idea, his view was everybody's racing for the exits on either side of the gym, but nobody's standing in the middle of the court wanting to have a conversation.
yeah. No.
And if we continue to do that, irrespective of the issue, now can imagine if we have another significant challenge, like let's in our few minutes less, let's not even start off on the aliens that are living in our ocean that we heard about at the US Congress hearings. If you think a little pandemic running around and killing a couple of million people was bad, wait till the aliens start popping out of the oceans. You think we're all going to have a similar agreement on how to negotiate with and deal with them?
Thank you for that.
Just thought I'd throw that out there.
And just now, I think, as I control myself, I try to. All right. I go back to that spectrum, and maybe this is how we're going to end. Most of us in our comfortable way of life are that middle group that neither hates it nor loves it.
Yep.
And so when we talk about preparedness and we talk about the challenges of persuading people, we're dealing with the uncommitted to begin with. And they don't even have a framework
No.
towards thinking about. Notice how I'm distancing myself from the final statement. They don't have a framework to think about the possibility of being persuaded to do something.
Yep.
There's the challenge. And so when we foster something like preparedness as a personal responsibility, never mind as a social responsibility, just as a personal responsibility, the pushback is going to be, I'm not responsible. I pay my taxes. Someone else is going to take care of this in the event that the building falls down. Yep. And if they don't, and I happen to survive it, then there's someone I'm going to sue.
Yep. Because I'm a victim.
Because now I'm a victim.
Yeah. I'm a victim. I was harmed.
That's right.
And somebody has to pay for that.
That's right. And so we live with convictions of comfort.
Yeah.
Don't ask me to do something because I'm not going to do it.
Nope.
All right. And on that happy note,
not joyful note,
we shall end.